Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, April 4th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the 2025 governor elections. Not just the governor elections, though, the regularly scheduled elections set to take place this coming November. It's going to be quite interesting to watch over the next months to see how they unfold through the summer and the fall as Donald Trump faces a lot of reckoning points with the stock market collapsing and a number of losses in states like Wisconsin and overall ground lost on the GOP side in Florida and Virginia and in many other states too that have held special elections like Pennsylvania, all to say we are at a point where we are starting to see the beginning of an anti-Trump wave come among us in this early stages of this second administration. Donald Trump in 2017 faced a very similar result that gave us a general indication and general idea of what we might see come 2018, and it was very much predictive. Virginia had gone to the Democratic Party by a very substantive amount, far better than what Secretary Clinton had performed against Donald Trump in the election prior, and looking at New Jersey as well, flipping this race from red to blue, the Democrats were able to do quite well with Phil Murphy at the top of the ticket. But 2021, just as 2017 was a reckoning point for Trump, 2021 was a reckoning point for Joe Biden. Those results were not so great for the Democratic Party, and you can see it visualized on the map here. In fact, New Jersey was decided by a margin of just 3.2% against Jack Ciattarelli, another impressive feat for the Republican Party in New Jersey, and it mattered a lot for the upcoming midterms, and was a very good predictor and way of displaying a general level of discontent that many voters had for the Biden-Harris administration at the time. Moving over to the state of Virginia, this was an even bigger one. Although New Jersey being close is news in its own right, Virginia had a flip. Democrats had maintained that governorship from 2013 onward, and for Glenn Youngkin to have flipped a state that Biden had won by over 10 points in the last election, it made a huge difference. Youngkin had swung the state effectively 12 percentage points to the right against Terry McAuliffe, who actually won a governorship in Virginia in 2013, despite Obama being president and, at the time, relatively as unpopular. Regardless, though, McAuliffe being the loser in this election and Youngkin being the winner, it carried over massive victories for the GOP. They had won back control in the Virginia House of Delegates. They were able to flip the Attorney General's race with a candidate going for his third term as Attorney General, and they flipped the Lieutenant Governor's race, effectively giving the Republicans near total dominance over the state. The only thing was that Democrats held on in the state Senate and obstructed Republicans from maintaining total dominance and a trifecta across Virginia. All to say that the results in 2021 were of course predictive eventually that Biden or Harris would lose the election and that Democrats have indeed lost ground due to unpopular or popular policies, whatever it might be. In this case, unpopular policies that were being enacted around this time. It was critical race theory as a big point of contention, as well as the Afghanistan withdrawal. All to say, I'm sorry I keep saying that, but all to say, yes, that this was a display of opposition to then President Biden. And so now as we look ahead to 2025, looking at the Wisconsin results, it is clear as day that Republicans are in for a major shift in some of the states they may not have even expected. The Florida results are a good indication of that in lower turnout elections like midterms are, and even better for Democrats in this case, like elections like Virginia and New Jersey's governorship and state legislative races in 2025, not just a midterm, but rather an off year, we see in Florida and Wisconsin that it's elections like these that really do drive Democrats out to the ballot box, and Republicans really just aren't as tuned in. They're not as tapped in. They're not as, enthusiastic to turn out like they might have been in 2024. These low propensity voters are showing why they're low propensity, because they don't vote in elections like these and only vote once every 4 years, if that. And so seeing how the Florida results ended up, seeing how Wisconsin ended up, it was really a really unique point for me, at least, seeing the shifts on such a dramatic scale that pretty much says Republicans are doomed in the House of Representatives and may, in fact, not make major gains in the Senate like they otherwise might have been able to had Kamala Harris been president, or had Donald Trump been in a more positive position, or should he be in a more positive position today. Now, 2025's races in Virginia are going to be interesting beyond just the governorship. We're not going to talk too much about the House of Delegates or the state Senate or the lieutenant governor or attorney general's race. Same thing can be said in New Jersey, but I will say this. It's going to be interesting to watch because Democrats have such a slim majority. It's very possible they expand it beyond a slim majority. They weren't able to win it back in 2017. They were able to win it back, though, in 2023. So they already have the advantage in the House of Delegates. The question now is, how do they expand further? But the governor's race is what I'm really interested in. There's a new development actually today, or technically yesterday. Abigail Spanberger, a congresswoman right now, or was a congresswoman, she is now the Democratic nominee. Why? Because no Democrats wanted to run against her. Not a single person. Everyone withdrew, or they decided to run for lieutenant governor. Nobody else filed. On the Republican side, though, it's still a bit up in the air. There's Winsome Sears, who's the current lieutenant governor. Amanda Chase, who ran for governor back in 2021, lost the GOP nomination to Glenn Youngkin. I really don't have a doubt in my mind that if Amanda Chase had won that nomination in 21, that she would have lost the election. Youngkin was much more measured. He reminds me a lot more of Mitt Romney, or even arguably, a Ron DeSantis light, but way more charismatic and has the ability to engage with voters in a way that isn't awkward. Looking at the Republican primary, though, Amanda Chase is not going to win this primary. Winsome Sears nearly has it on lock, right? But the point being, the Democrats can focus, right? Amanda Chase will, in fact, give Winsome Sears a run for her money. It's going to be interesting to watch, undoubtedly, but the Republican primary isn't, a open book, closed book, right? It's not going to be that quick. Abigail Spanberger, though, is, because there's nobody else running against her. So Democrats already have won an advantage in that they have a very clear path to the general election from here on out, which means all of the messaging, all of the ads, everything can be oppositional rather than focusing on an internal primary that would have dragged it on later into mid-June. Instead, it's going to be straight into the general election. That also helps, too, that Virginia was a state that Glenn Youngkin only won by roughly 2 points. Now, don't get me wrong, the shift of 12 points is impressive in its own right, but it's less impressive compared to what Republicans have been seeing their losses look like in Florida and Wisconsin, and 2 points is not secure enough by any metric to say that Virginia is locked or solid for the GOP. In fact, they are certainly not the favorites in November, not based on what we're seeing. And it also doesn't help, too, that Virginia, unlike New Jersey, stands at a unique point where the government layoffs and the DOGE cuts and everything involving this second Trump administration is having a direct impact. I'm from Maryland. I know so many people whose parents or who themselves are federal workers who work at the NIH and Bethesda, who work in these different organizations. And I say this to say that what we see in Maryland is that there is a real impact of these government layoffs, these mass government layoffs for people like me who know people who are out of a job, who no longer have anything to provide for their family after decades of being employed by the federal government. And Virginia is getting it just as bad, if not worse. And so Virginia, as a swing state in theory, having a direct negative economic impact because of Trump's decisions, what better state to push back against an incumbent president? New Jersey, I think, will also be good for the Democratic Party. It might not have been had Kamala Harris been president. I do think Republicans probably would have won it, given how close they were able to get it in 2024. But then under that reality, New Jersey probably wouldn't have been as close if Kamala Harris had won the national election. But still, take away the hypotheticals, New Jersey probably would be closer than Virginia, probably will be closer than Virginia. I think that's very reasonable, despite history of New Jersey being a much more solid Democratic state. Regardless, though, this governor's race is going to be interesting because Republicans would have had a much better shot. Based on what we're seeing up and around the country, I no longer deem that to be the case. Do I think Virginia and New Jersey are not going to be, I don't think they're going to be blowouts, sure. But I think they're going to be pretty solid for the Democratic Party. I think we're going to see margins rival that of 2017. An 8, 9, 10-point victory for Democrats in Virginia, probably anywhere from 6, 7, 8, 9 points for Democrats in New Jersey. But you're still continuing the balance of power in favor of one political party, that being the Democrats in New Jersey and Virginia, largely because of disapproval with Donald Trump. So when I look at these 2025 elections, I am near confident that because of the results we've seen in Wisconsin and Florida and what we know about history, that barring a natural disaster, the size of which would have to be Hurricane Katrina or a foreign entity, right, doing a domestic terror attack like 9/11, Donald Trump's approval rating is not going to skyrocket or suddenly surge to a point where he's going to be saved in multiple elections. I mean, it just goes without saying that a president is going to inevitably be unpopular. For Donald Trump, it came far earlier than many people have seen in their presidential approval history. Biden had at least 6 months of an approval rating, honeymoon. Donald Trump only had 2. Granted, it's better than where it was right in that first term. If you remember, he was unpopular 2 weeks into his first administration. Now it's about a month and a half. Either way, though, a lot more time before November, but not a lot of time for Donald Trump, and not a lot of an expectation that he's going to build up his approval between now and November 2025 or 2026 or even 2028. And I think that's going to be a really big problem for the Republican Party, because their argument could have been under a President Kamala Harris that Democrats are overreaching, that this would be the first and whatever, right? We know how the game is played. It's the same thing Democrats are going to run against Trump now. But not only are Democrats going to run the same traditional playbook, they have an additional value add that Elon Musk being involved in the government is only hurting Donald Trump, and he continues to remain involved in the federal government, in the White House, in Donald Trump's daily, appearances and all of these different things. He's in the Oval Office, whatever it might be. That's going to be a unique value add, especially in Virginia for the Democrats. When I say value add, especially for Democrats in Virginia, because it is one of the 2 states that directly bordering and neighboring the nation's capital are seeing the very real and harsh economic impacts of Donald Trump's second administration. And that is why I do feel adamantly Virginia will be pretty much on lock for Abigail Spanberger and the Democrats, again, barring some type of major incident, and in New Jersey. Although maybe not for the same reasons as seeing direct fallout of workers from the federal government in New Jersey, I still do believe, as is nationwide largely, Donald Trump's rhetoric, Donald Trump's actions are largely unpopular. And if they're unpopular on a national stage, when the national popular vote backed Trump by 1.5%, a state that voted for Kamala Harris by a likely margin, roughly 6 points, is certainly going to be discontent with the incumbent president. And it would be foolish, really, for Republicans to believe, for an instance, that they are going to win Virginia and New Jersey together. They may have an outsized chance in one of the states, maybe, and heavy on the maybe. But it's not likely. It's not practical to assume that will be the case. And so when I see Virginia and I see New Jersey, after seeing Wisconsin and Florida and Pennsylvania, and in the 16 of the 17 special elections that have been held to date that Democrats have overperformed in, no reason to believe that Virginia or New Jersey would be any different, and no reason to believe that a party that is diminishing in terms of public trust and approval, a president who is crashing the stock market in the eyes of the American voter, that is damaging the economy with tariffs that the average voter seemingly does not approve of, at least not right now. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but right now they don't. And you have to act with political smarts. But Donald Trump doesn't have to face re-election. There is no direct, well, say that right now, potentially, right? Could be re-election at some point. But Donald Trump doesn't have to worry about re-election. And so all of these maneuvers and all of these decisions, very high level, very much seen as executive overreach, don't impact him because he doesn't need to ask for anybody's vote again. But Republicans do. And the longer they stick by him, the longer that they are still associated with him. And you can't really say, as a Republican nominee, disavowing the president, you're just not going to win regardless, right? But it doesn't help that the association is so embedded that Donald Trump is bringing him down, and his whole talking point of the economy seems to be blowing up in the White House's face. And that's why I think right now, where we are, Democrats are extremely well positioned for New Jersey and Virginia, and we should acknowledge it. Not to say Democrats can ever take things for granted. They are, the party historically of taking things for granted, absolutely. But I do think there is some sanity in assuming the Democrats are the favorites in these races today, barring anything, major changing between now and November. And my likelihood of that, less than 5%, right? Virginia and New Jersey, 2 states the Democrats won in 24, won in 2020, won in 2016, won in 2012, won in 2008. Very likely to go for Democrats this November. But the margins are what matters, and I do think Democrats are going to outperform 2017, at least in Virginia, and that'll be very interesting to see the implications of that for 2026 and beyond. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.